Hi guys, how are you doing? Welcome to our Economic Stories channel. Today we're going to talk about one of the major growing concerns in the world, aka increment in food prices. So without further delay, let's get started. When the epidemic began in March 2020, many people saw bare food store shelves for the first time in their lives. After more than a year of the epidemic, they're seeing a new trend in terms of food access: much higher pricing. Food sector cost hikes, rising agricultural product costs, transportation delays, and greater consumer demand have resulted in the greatest annual grocery price rises in years, as well as the largest average restaurant prices hikes since the early 1980s. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, food costs have grown at a quicker average pace than in the previous decade. On a regular 12-month basis, food costs have risen on an average of 3.6% for food purchased for the first consumption and 3.9% for grocery stores away from home since April 2020. This is a significant rise from the decade preceding up to the pandemic, when costs climbed on a monthly 12-month basis by an average of 1.2% for food purchased for at-home use and 2.5% for food purchased away from home, according to observations. Throughout the epidemic, food costs have been extremely variable. From March to April 2020, grocery store prices rose by the most in a single month since the 1970s, as people rushed to stock their pantries due to restaurant closure and anxiety about sustainable mobility and availability. Worker sickness in the meatpacking industry followed soon after, shutting down roughly 40% of the country's processing capabilities at one time in May 2020. As a result, retail steak and ham prices surged. As the first interruptions to the agri-food system abated, pressure on food prices began to ease in the summer of 2021. However, in recent months, a convergence of circumstances has accelerated the rate of food price rises. As a whole, food costs in households are up by 9.3%, while food prices outdoors are up by 8.5% in October 2021 compared to January 2020. Because meat costs account for such a major portion of consumers' food budgets, changes in meat prices have a significant impact on price indexes. In October 2021, beef, hog, and chicken costs are 26.2%, 19.2%, and 14.8% more than they were before the epidemic in January 2020. Even after accounting for general inflation, prices for such food products have risen to the highest levels ever. In October 2020, the retail price for ham, for example, was $7.31 a pound, up 36% from October 1980 in inflation-adjusted figures. Initially, the rise in meat prices was due to supply shortages induced by packing factory closures when workers contracted COVID-19. In addition, animal and chick feeding prices have risen drastically. Domestic and international buyer demand for U.S. beef has been robust, resulting in higher supply prices. Approximately 14 cents on every dollar spent of food by a consumer reflects the cost of agricultural products at the field level. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, prices for basic agricultural products such as maize, wheat, rice, and soybeans have skyrocketed. The Food Price Index of the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, which analyzes worldwide prices of commodities used in food production, is up 30% in October 2021, ranging from pre-pandemic levels in January 2020. Commodity prices have been rising as a result of supply disruptions caused by adverse weather in major crop-growing regions. Example, Derecho in the Middle East of the United States, in summer 2020, drought also in Argentina, Brazil, and Western United States in 2021, and higher input prices such as fertilizer and weed killers. Even though restaurant spending took a blow in the aftermath of the epidemic, it has fully recovered. In August 2021, expenditure on food at home was up 21%, while spending on food away from home was up 24%. Compared with pre-pandemic January 2020, retail food prices have most likely been influenced by policy and monetary issues. COVID economic impact has gone through three phases. Payments to households supplied additional revenue, while legislative improvements to programs such as the Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, often known as food stamps, made it easier for low-income families to shop for food online. Strong foreign demand has added to many of the retail pricing pressures in terms of domestic reasons. For example, US beef exports surged by over 48% in August 2021 compared to August 2020, while Chinese purchases of various US farm products increased dramatically in the second half of 2020 and early 2021, creating demand and driving prices higher. Food sector labor rates have risen dramatically throughout the epidemic, and these higher salaries are mirrored in rising food costs. From January 2020 to September 2021, the average weekly wages of industrial and post employees working in food production climbed by 11.1%. Weekly profits have climbed 19.1% in animal domestication and processing during the same period. Since the beginning of the epidemic, wages for quasi-employees in food retail, that is supermarkets, have climbed by 8.5%, while wages for workers in meals, that is restaurants, have increased by 15.5%. The US government subsidizes corn cultivation for biofuels, which depletes the food supply and raises prices. Presently, the United States uses 37% of most of its maize production to produce ethanol. This is an increase of over 6% in 2000. Extreme weather is becoming increasingly common as a result of climate change, and is therefore caused by greenhouse gas emissions, which trap heat and raise air temperatures. More moisture is absorbed by hot air. It rains less, water evaporates from lakes and rivers, and the ground dries up. When it rains, the water flows off the soil rather than being absorbed into the groundwater. Floods ensue. As a result, it harms crops. The World Trade Organization, or the WTO, places restrictions on how much subsidized grain and wheat nations may add to global stocks. The agricultural sectors of the USA, the European Union, and certain emerging nations are extensively subsidized. Those countries' farmers enjoy an unfair trading edge. Stockpiling is prohibited by the WTO to reduce this advantage. However, amid a food scarcity, it limits the amount of food available. Food price volatility rises as a result of this. As the world's population grows wealthier, people are consuming more meat, particularly pork. For meat-based meals, more grain is required to feed the animals than for grain-based meals. Meat demand is increasing, which implies grain costs are rising as well. This might eventually compensate for decreasing meat and dairy consumption in the United States. The United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, forecasts a 1% to 2% increase in food at home, that's grocery shop costs, from 2022. Prices which were raised owing to supply constraints during the epidemic are expected to revert to normal. Food prices at home are expected to rise 3.5% in 2020. According to the USDA, food away from home restaurant prices are expected to rise by 2% to 3%. After many eateries were forced to close due to the epidemic, demand would increase. Costs for dairy, poultry, fresh fruit, and vegetables are likely to climb by up to 1%, while cereal and pastry prices are expected to rise by 1.5% to 2.5%. Prices for beef and veal are likely to fall 1.5% to 2.5%. Prices for pork and eggs might fluctuate between a 0.5% decrease and a 0.5% increase. Prices for fish and seafood are likely to climb by 1.5% to 2.5%. Global food demand remains strong 2 years later, but higher fuel prices and freight costs, as well as other supply chains bottlenecks such as a shortage of delivery drivers and boxes, continue to drive up prices. According to Christian Bogmans, an economist at the International Monetary Fund, if this does not stop or get reduced anytime soon, I wonder we might end up coming to a stage where even a slice of bread would be equal to a 3-course meal at a 5-star eatery. So these are all I have to tell you. Till we meet again, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It's your friend signing off. Thanks for watching the video. Adios.